Hello, this is Heather Francis, and welcome to the Artful Teaching Podcast. I'm really excited to tell you about our episode today. We have two special guests interviewed. They are, of course, our co-host for this season, Brenda Beyal, and our dear friend, Chris Roberts. Chris and Brenda have taught and worked together for several decades, and it's really a treat to hear them speak, reminisce, and teach us in this episode today. We were able to capture this episode when we invited Chris and Brenda in to be recorded for an instructional video, but we had such a great, rich conversation that we knew we needed to take this entire audio and share it with our listeners. Chris and Brenda were part of the driving force behind the Native American Curriculum Initiative. We owe a lot of what we've been able to learn and do with this initiative to their expertise and sensitivity to the needs of teachers and to the needs of the Native people who live among us today. Welcome to the Artful Teaching Podcast. Today we have Chris Roberts here with us. Please, Chris, state your name and who you are and how you're related to this initiative.
My name is Chris Roberts, and I am currently the Provo City School District Arts Coordinator, and I'm also the Beverly Sorenson Arts Integration Coach. And how I became involved in this initiative, my history with Brenda Beyal goes way, way back. We started, I was teaching in a self-contained classroom for behaviorally disordered kids and out in the trailers. And I was tired of my students being called either the Reese retards or the trailer kids. So I started going into the main building, and connecting with teachers. And Brenda was one of the ones that really opened up to me. And so we started doing things together. And real simple things at first, PE, and then field trips, and then other things like that. And then I started sharing articles with Brenda about different things, and we found out we had a whole lot in common, and we started thinking about, is what we're doing right now the greatest thing we can do for kids? And we didn't think we were. And so we started planning and talking, and eventually we came up with a whole new program of multi-age that was based on the arts and on environmental ed. And she just kind of drew me along on her path after she retired from Nebo. And so I guess I'm kind of following along on her tail, kind of hanging on. Hey Brenda, bring me along. So anyway, that's how you could say I got into this initiative.
Oh, Brenda, I'm sure you would like to respond.
Chris Roberts is an amazing man. My name is Brenda Beyal, and I am the program coordinator for the Native American Curriculum Initiative. And I have to say for 32 years that I tied a knot and hung on to Chris's tales, because Abraham Lincoln was actually the one that said that, wasn't it? When things get tough, tie a knot and hang on.
That's right.
And Chris played Abraham Lincoln for like 38 years.
A lot of times.
It's the only time that he ever shaved his mustache, when he played Abraham Lincoln and presented in front of the kids. So I have to say that Chris and I both have a disease, and the disease is creative discontent. The discontent of teaching the same way everyone else does, because that's what you're supposed to do. We always asked ourselves, what is best for the students in our classrooms? What will help them to become global citizens? And with that came our experiences, or helping our children experience cooperative learning. I don't know, environmental education, the arts, and even Native American curriculum or content to the extent that most students would never experience at such a young age. And so Chris and I have all, we have that disease. We always want to try something, do something more for our children.
I believe you both have the disease of reading books and articles as well. So Chris stated earlier to me that he read a book and he was sharing ideas with you, and you started talking about culturally responsive teaching, particularly around Native American content, and that you ended up presenting together at the Arts Express Summer Conference for Elementary School Teachers. Can you tell us about that workshop, Chris?
Well, it's always funny when Brenda and I plan a presentation. We write on the paper, okay, let's say the presentation starts at 9 o'clock. We write 9 o'clock. And we write what we're going to do. And then it might be 9:08 and write. And then we think, okay, 9:14 and we write what we're going to do then. And then we write 9:21. And we do our best to estimate what that's going to be. And it's never turns out that way, because when we get into it and start talking with teachers and experiencing and listening to them, we adjust right away. We adjust to what we're going to do, and we respond to those teachers in our workshop. And we presented all these different ideas of where if they started at maybe just at this level, start doing this level, it would be maybe just the leaves of the tree of culturally responsive teaching. And then maybe if they added these next things, it would be the branches of that culturally responsive classroom. And then if they added a couple more things, it'd add the trunk. And then if they went really deep, it'd add the roots. And so they'd have a complete culturally responsive classroom.
How did teachers respond to that workshop, Brenda?
We were well received. Going back to what Chris said, it's interesting because the very first thing we always ask is, so what do you teach? How many elementary teachers are there? How many of you teach kindergarten? How many of you teach third grade? And when we do that, we always are looking to meet the needs of individuals. And so that's why it takes us on paths that we're really sometimes not prepared for, but we always feel like we need to go into. And so the teachers, I think, came away with renewed confidence maybe, and possibly maybe an opening to a door that they were a little nervous about entering, especially when it comes to culturally responsive pedagogy.
Teachers want to be culturally responsive. They really do. The teachers that we worked with, of course, they signed up for our class, but in my experience, because I work with a lot of teachers, I can't even think of one that wants to stay and do the same old, and not even care about who's in their classroom, what culture they represent. And they all want to be sensitive to those cultures and do their best to meet the needs of those students. Could I possibly share a moment of not that particular presentation we did at Arts Express, but it was another one. The reason why I want to share this is because I got to think of something instead of Brenda thinking of something. So usually what we do is we have all our plans. Now I'm going to go back to when Brenda and I taught together. And we'd have this all laid out. We've worked many, many minutes, even hours, planning something. And then Brenda will come to school the next day. You guys, I have this great idea. Well, let's do this. And so we have to scratch everything we planned. And because Brenda always has this great inspiration. This time the inspiration came to me. I'm shaving right before getting ready to go. And this thought comes to me about totem poles and what we can do with these teachers with totem poles from the Northwest area of our country. And so I go and I get there and I tell Brenda about it, and she says, we've got to do that, Chris. So the idea is that totem poles, it's actually a genealogy of the family living in that large cedar plank home. And the totem pole represents all the different people going way, way back in time. So we taught this to our teachers, and then we had them get in groups of 4 or 3 or 4, and they made totem poles, and they made a statue representing someone in their lineage, a grandmother, maybe a great-grandmother, a grandfather, an uncle, something. And then this is a tableau, they're frozen, and then either Brenda and I would go and tap them, and they'd step out of the totem pole and tell their story. And we heard so many heartfelt stories. I mean, people were crying, people were laughing. It was an incredible experience. So,
the reason why that particular activity was so inspiring, I think, is because it went away from how teachers usually teach about totem poles in the classroom. Most of the time they will ask their students to bring toilet paper rolls and create a totem pole. But in this case, we use drama or an art form to help connect to what totem poles really stand for. They stand for the important parts of their genealogy. And you're right, Chris, we did just throw everything out, and it was wonderful. It was inspiring. We weren't culturally appropriating anything, and we connected with who was in our classroom that day.
So you talk about using toilet paper rolls to create totem poles. We also know that there's been a tradition of using paper bags or construction paper feathers, some of these sort of school classroom crafts as an attempt to learn about Native Americans. But we are seeking a more culturally responsive way to do this, correct? Have there been other experiences you've had in helping to illustrate the sensitivity around these types of teaching decisions?
I'll share one idea and then Brenda can share. About 8 years ago it was, more about 6 years ago, on the BTS website, they like to highlight different BTS art specialists. And one that they were highlighting was a visual artist, and on part of the work that they showed were the student work of copies of False Face Society. So the False Face Society is a healing society from the Haudenosaunee, and I just said that wrong. I forget.
Haudenosaunee.
Thank you. You would know them as the Iroquois people. And to become a member of the False Face Society, a dream has to come to you where you see your mask that you're going to make. And the masks are super scary looking because they believed that when someone was sick, evil spirits were inside of them. And these False Face Society members would come and dance crazy, scary dances to scare the evil spirits out. So anyway, this art educator was trying to teach her students, about the False Face Society and had them create. Well, the False Face Society is a super spiritual part of that tribe. And like I said, you don't even become a member unless you have a dream. And after you have that dream, you go to the chief and tell them about your dream, and he will ask you, describe the mask to me. I mean, he wants to make sure you've clearly seen it. And then he says, okay, prepare yourself, and you fast and you pray, and then you go out into the forest and you walk and walk until whatever tree talks to you and says, I'm the tree you're going to make your mask out of. You offer your prayers to that tree and you carve your mask while the tree is standing into the bark of the tree. And then you cut the tree down and you take the mask out and you paint it all these crazy colors. It's culturally insensitive for us to ask kids to create these false face masks because those false face, the whole society is super sacred, and we just shouldn't be doing that.
I love that, Chris. The thing that I think that I can think about is using the word kiva in schools. For so long, everyone called a central space within their school kiva. But a kiva is a spiritual place that the Hopi and the Pueblo people use for their sacred ceremonies, for their councils. And there are certain protocols within that kiva. And so sometimes it's hard to let go of language that is inappropriate. But I have found teachers who are willing to take up that fight or become allies of especially the Pueblo people in reclaiming that word. The Hopi people deserve to have that word used in everyday society the way it should be used. It is a place for sacred ceremonies, for councils over grave matters. There is nothing that is dark or forceful within that kiva. And so reclaiming that is probably it's allowing Native people to reclaim language and reclaim voice, but it's also important for the non-Native to allow that or to accept that there should be some kind of reconciliation.
You acknowledge what you've noticed in lesson plans or in verbiage that we use in schools. How did you respond to that lesson plan? Did you talk to the creator of the lesson plan? Have you ever talked to a teacher about changing the word kiva? How have you interacted with teachers on those topics?
I'll go ahead and continue with the word kiva. This summer I presented at a conference in Escalante, and at that time I had a teacher come to me and say, tell me about kivas and why it is important for us to change that. And so I told her the story, and she said, how do I approach someone? Or how do I approach my team? Or how do I approach the principal? And I just said, you were in a place of learning. The environment that you were in is in a place of learning and changing. And we have to allow for that learning to continue, especially when no is the answer. Sometimes no is the learning. And she said, I think I can go to my principal and my team and say, we're a place of learning. We should be learning and growing. And this is one place where we can learn and grow and become more culturally sensitive and responsible.
And back to my story, as far as that particular specialist, I didn't know who it was, and I didn't, of course, contact them. And I even if I had known, I wouldn't do that, because I know in her heart thought she was doing the right thing and wanting to teach her students about this society, which is great. So the way I operate now is, if a teacher comes to me and asks me questions, then I share everything that I know and that I feel is right. But as I visit and observe, like new teachers, I work with a lot of new teachers. And if I don't see their lesson plan ahead of time and I'm just in observing and they teach a lesson, I would afterwards then, if it's a new teacher, then talk to them about that. And I would ask them questions about, so tell me how you got the idea of your lesson. And let's say it was about a Paiute. It was a Paiute story. I might ask, how do you think a Paiute in your classroom would have reacted to your lesson? And just to get them thinking about it.
It's a really great question to prompt empathy, which is a lot of that learning journey many of us are going on, where maybe we're ignorant to some of these things that are insensitive, and then we learn about them and we have to really activate that empathy. I believe there's a story about the bear dance in your history together. Is that true?
So this happened maybe 9 years ago, before I even got involved in working with Brenda with this Native American initiative. And I like teaching dance, and I had a group of students that I wanted them to know about the Ute bear dance. And at the time, everything that I had read about the Ute bear dance was that it was a social dance. And it's a dance in the spring for the awakening, when the bear wakes out of hibernation, and that the Utes do. And it's a woman's choice, like a Sadie Hawkins thing. The women go out and choose the men that they want to dance with, and the man can't say no. They have to get up and dance with that woman. So everything I had read and studied was, okay, social dance, I think it's going to be okay. And I didn't ask anyone. I made the huge mistake of not asking anyone about it. I didn't contact the Ute tribe. And I taught this Ute, because there were videos on YouTube on the Ute bear dance. And I even made the wooden stick they use that has ridges on it, and you take another stick and you put it on metal, and it's like the sound of the bear sharpening its claws on the tree. So now I know that that was totally inappropriate, because the Ute bear dance is a special ceremonial dance that only they would do. You wouldn't teach it. It's not something that they would want the white kids, they would want maybe white kids to know about it and to be able to even watch them doing it on YouTube. But you wouldn't have other cultures, whether you're Irish or German or American, you wouldn't have them doing it, because it's not that culture. And this is a special ceremony of when the bear in the spring to celebrate spring and new life and stuff. Yeah, so I've repented, and I don't teach the bear dance. So
I think it's interesting because one of the guiding principles of our initiative is to accept goodwill, to accept that people make mistakes, and we all make mistakes. And so once we learn that maybe we have done something that is inappropriate, that we move forward. We fix what we can and we move forward. And that because I've been a teacher for so many years, I always accept that the teacher was doing the very best that they could when they were actually, doing whatever they were doing. And so that makes it important for our initiative to continue to provide context, to provide background information, and to help teachers with lesson plans that they feel confident in teaching.
Chris, you set a great example of growing and learning on your journey. Even that instance you described was towards the end of your teaching career, correct? So
that's right.
You're never at a plateau place, right? As a teacher, there's always something new to learn and grow on. But sometimes these stories of repentance, as an educator myself, make me worried and make me nervous. What if, because I hear Chris's story and I want to learn from his cautionary tale, listen to his experience, learn from it myself. So my question is, how do you want teachers to feel?
We want teachers to feel like they're learners. And learners, we learn by sometimes making mistakes. Native American pedagogy has in it the idea that mistakes are to be learned from. And I would hope that if a teacher makes a mistake, that we would recognize their learning and help them to move forward from that.
And Heather, you brought up the word empathy, and that's what we want. And like Brenda said, and I said earlier too, we really do feel that teachers, they're not in the job for the money. They love their students, and they want to do what's best for their students. And so when they find out about the information that we're sharing, we know that they'll go, oh, okay. And our goal is not to make them feel bad about anything they've done in the past. I know what I did was wrong, and I don't feel bad about it. I mean, I know, okay, I've corrected it. I know better now. And so we want them to, just like Brenda just said, to continually grow on their path and not be afraid of making mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We're humans. And to learn from those mistakes, like Brenda said.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Heather, for being so interested in having the discontent within yourself also.
Artful Teaching is made possible by the BYU Arts Partnership and the McKay School of Education. Thanks to James Houston for editing this podcast. Music was generously provided by Connor Chi, a Navajo Diné composer and performer. And special thanks to all of the teachers who are changing lives every day while serving in schools.
If you like what you heard, please leave us a review. You can find all the show notes for this episode and more resources at advancingartsleadership.com.
And don't forget to check out our tribe-approved lesson plans on the website as well.
I'm Heather Francis.
And I'm Callie Phlox.
And I'm Brenda Beyal.
Wishing you an artful journey.